Welcome to Normal Ireland Live. I'm Curtis Daly, and I'm joined by a critical theorist, Louisa Munch. I'm so excited that you're on this show. A mini celebrity, shall I say? I mean, you've been blowing up on Instagram. It's
I
an honour and a
know.
privilege to have you.
Oh, thank you so much. It's a privilege to be here, trust me.
Oh, it's going to be a great show. We've got a packed out show, actually, and I'm very looking forward to your analysis and insights. But this is what we've got coming up on tonight's show. Margaret Thatcher, the most popular Prime Minister, poll shows. Ex-Doctor Who writer publishes hit piece on Zach Polanski and the Greens. And Israel already breaks ceasefire deal. Now, you can help us grow by visiting turnleftmedia.co.uk/support to help fund our work, or by becoming a YouTube member. But on to our first story. A recent YouGov poll has shown that Margaret Thatcher is the most popular Prime Minister over the last 50 years. Thatcher ranked number one in the YouGov survey with 29%. The runner-up was Tony Blair with 12%, while no other figure scored above 6%. Now, it's a list which consists mostly of bad Prime Ministers, including David Cameron. Remember, he oversaw the deaths of 330,000 people due to austerity. Now, despite Thatcher winning the poll, it by no means shows that she's universally revered. Many took to Twitter to voice their opinion. Margaret Thatcher is dead, and they couldn't bury her deep enough. Destroyed hope and communities in equal measures. Happy birthday to Margaret Thatcher, who would have been 100 years old today, were it not for the fact that she's dead. Happy 100th birthday, Margaret Thatcher. Ding dong, the witch is still dead. Let's hope she stays that way. Now, I'm sure many of you will remember the song Ding Dong, the Witch Is Gone. That got to number 2 in the charts when she died. Now, many continue to mock her after death because people rightfully hate Thatcher, the architect of the UK neoliberal project. Thatcher's free market reforms, dubbed Thatcherism, coincided with a sharp rise in income inequality in Britain. The UK's Gini coefficient, 0 meaning total equality, jumped from 0.253 in 1979 to 0.339 by 1990, one of the fastest increases in inequality on record. Alongside inequality, poverty rates climbed dramatically under Thatcher. In 1979, roughly 13% of Britons lived in relative poverty, below 60% of median income. By 1990, that had risen to about 22%, over 12 million people living in poverty. The era saw mass unemployment, joblessness topped 3 million, the highest since the Great Depression in the early 1980s, and social safety nets were tightened. Now, part of the neoliberal reforms was the mass privatisation of our public services. This included steel, railways, airways, airports and aerospace, and of the utilities, gas, electricity, telecoms and water. The working class was a target, right? None of this was about sound economics. In fact, she claims that economics was simply the method in which to change society. Economics are the method. The object is to change the soul. And that she did, by the way. I mean, she used economics to destroy the working class. She smashed the miners and described striking workers as the enemy within. And one of the staple policies which we are still living through was right to buy. Now, this system created winners and losers, elevating some people from the working class by allowing renters in council houses to buy them for a discounted price. This then made a whole host of landlords in which those properties were rented back to other members of the working class. This policy was deliberate in dividing the working class, and it worked. But what didn't work was the property-owning democracy she wanted. We are still living in a housing crisis that links directly back to her. 42 years later, the property-owning democracy she craved is receding from view. When Right to Buy was launched as part of the Housing Act 1980, 55% of householders were homeowners. The figure peaked at 72% in the early noughties, but currently stands at 65%. Meanwhile, Council housing has decreased too. In 1979, there were 6.5 million council homes. Now there are 2.2 million, while 4.4 million households rent privately, twice as many as 15 years ago. Now, Thatcher wasn't particularly popular when she was PM. In fact, her government, after just 3 years, were nearly on the brink. That was until the Falklands. This rescued her government and her popularity increased. None of these changes, right? Or none of this changes the fact that Thatcher changed Britain forever and we're still living under neoliberalism 45 years later. Louisa, why do you think, despite everything, Thatcher is the most popular Prime Minister?
I think this is so interesting, obviously, because not only is my PhD on nostalgia, and I think this particular poll really represents this sense of a nostalgia for not only the era of Thatcher, but a pre-Thatcher time. But it makes me think of something that my nana says, and she said, for as much as Thatcher destroyed, she was a cleaner, like she's very, very working class, and they've felt the brunt of Thatcherism more than anyone. But the one thing she always says is Thatcher said she would do something and she would do it. She represented this iron lady. I think she represented the last sort of government or power in government that was tangible and that people could actually see and feel. And obviously, she relinquished all this power to the markets. Now politics feels so disenchanted because they don't have a lot of power. That power is entirely to the market. And I think she probably represents like the very last stage of when power was within people. Obviously, she deregulated the market, she deregulated government, and she removed people from power. And obviously, we hit finance now rules. And I think as well the need and want for a strong man in the era that we're in now, where we feel so powerless and there is that aggrievement. I think Thatcher, the Iron Lady, really speaks to that one in need as well. But obviously, it does come from aggrievement and not from this place of like understanding what she actually did.
No, I think that's probably true. I think one thing we know is politicians of the last 10, 20 years, they don't seem to do anything, right? And I think people want problem solvers. They want solutions. And for all of Thatcher's faults, you can't call her incompetent. And I think we've had a slew of politicians who say they're going to do something, don't quite do it. And there is that nostalgia to a politician who's really strong, because let's be honest, people respect strength. I think part of Trump's sort of rise is that I think he's a pretty weak man, if you ask me, but that that veneer of strength, right? And I think people look back at Thatcher and say, well, she did something. She changed Britain. Of course, she changed it in a very bad way. Actually, obviously, look, you're well versed on neoliberalism. What do you think is about Thatcher and her policies that changed Britain forever, that even 45 years later, she can poll number one as Prime Minister?
I think she represented a time that people they believed in politics. And I don't think people do believe that. I feel like the disenchantment we are seeing and the distrust we have in government, in politics, in ourselves as well, to be able to have any change is something that speaks to that. And I think Thatcher in particular, like, obviously we've had all her deregulation and the climate crisis, direct result of what how she deregulated these markets and said, we don't care about health and safety, and that's eroded and eroded and eroded. I think that's probably the biggest impact she's had, is not only are we living past neoliberalism, like this is like the end days of neoliberalism, and it's a zombie. It just keeps going on and on and on. Like, it died in 2008, but there was no other ideas around at the time to pick up. And I think it's the relentlessness of neoliberalism. She said over and over again, there's no alternative. And I think that is the very idea that we feel, and even politicians feel, like we just have to keep continuing with this, government, this politics, this economic method, because there's no other option when we really, really need to think of other options. Like, I don't know if anyone's heard of socialism, guys, or, all these other alternatives that we need to be putting thought and effort into thinking about. But where, again, does this imagination machine happen? And she's from what she did, we've had the financialization of the universities and these spaces like libraries and community centers where these sorts of ideas are cultivated. And I think possibly one of the biggest impacts she has is the disimagination machine, is manufactured ignorance that we've seen from the dismantling and financialization of education. I mean, obviously, I work in education, and they talk about these Mickey Mouse degrees now, and it's like, get your money's worth out of your degree. It's not about critical thinking, or it's a personal investment, and that individualism, that's individualization of education, which is a public good. And I think that's probably for me what the biggest impact she's had.
Yeah, I agree. People in chat helpfully saying that also Section 28. There's many things that she was destructive with that too. I think for me, though, one of the smartest things she did was to divide within the working class. And I think that was through Right to Buy, by elevating some working class people, not others. And that class consciousness, I wouldn't say this country had, extreme class consciousness, but it's far worse today than it has been. And I think that was part of smashing that. So that's why she was so effective. But let's leave it there and go on to our next story of the evening. Former Doctor Who writer Gareth Roberts turned Spectator columnist attacked Zach Polanski and the Green Party for hitting 110,000 members. The writer of The Shakespeare Code and The Unicorn and The Wasp said there is little correlation between membership numbers and electoral success. The Greens are having quite a moment since the anointing of Zach Polanski as leader of the party. There's been a 45% increase in the membership, which is now up to about 100,000 believers. The party is also doing very well, comparatively speaking, in opinion polling, reaching about 15%, not very far behind the Tories. But while the Greens are keen to talk up polling success and growing membership, which is naturally good for party coffers, it won't necessarily correlate to wider electoral success. We've been here before. During Jeremy Corbyn's leadership of Labour, the membership peaked at a modern high of about 500,000, and we know how that ended. The Polanski surge has come courtesy of a Corbyn-esque policy blitz, including abolishing landlords, legalising every recreational drug, and opening up the nation's borders to all and sundry. I mean, you see, right, there's nothing about open borders from the Green Party or anyone on the left. And look, there's a mile difference between defending migrants and attacking the economic system to saying everyone can come here and, there's zero cap on that. But the next point he makes, it's really, really stupid. Green voters clearly like what they see. Success beckons, or does it? The truth is that the Greens' booming membership still makes up a tiny group. It's so hard for us poor humans with our Neolithic, village-sized brains to grasp big numbers. Comparatively, tiny amounts of people can have a disproportionately huge influence in the public sphere, deluding both themselves and us. 105,000 people, now 110. The Greens' reported membership is 0.16% of the population. Now, there has never been a time in politics where the majority of the population has joined a party. So comparing membership numbers to the amount of people is silly. And comparatively, The Spectator has 93,000 subscribers. So I guess they're even more irrelevant than the Greens. But he also contradicts himself, right? He admits that a small number of people drive the political discourse, as has always been the case. But the majority of his article claims membership numbers mean nothing. But the article gets better. He accused the establishment of being left-wing. Research from Electoral Calculus tells us, for example, that the people who form the establishment of the country, necessarily a small group, are overwhelmingly progressive left in their opinions, splitting an astonishing 75% in favour of the left, 81% for academics and teachers. I mean, what is he talking about? Who is this establishment in the Electoral Calculus? I think he's just made it up, you know. This is following the line of Matt Goodwin, pushing the false narrative of the so-called new elite, which are students, doctors, and teachers. Yes, academia leans left. It's almost as if reality has a left-wing bias. But the establishment is the same as it always was, right? The political and economic elite, right? The politicians and the billionaires and multimillionaires who rule over us. That is who the establishment are. Gareth then finishes off with a strange point about reparations being racist. An urgent correction is indeed... I'll start that one again, sorry. An urgent correction is needed, I'm afraid, and there must be no squeamishness. There has to be a screening program of some kind for these jobs, a modern test act. Maybe use an AI to trawl through their works and see if they've ever used, in all seriousness, the word systemic. A reset is needed. It should be, for example, as unacceptable to bang on about the racist rubbish of reparations as it is to use the P or the N word. Okay, I mean, what started off as a hit piece, and I say it's a hit piece because he hasn't made an article about membership numbers from other parties, just the Greens, right? And now he's expanded into utter nonsense. And by the way, the Shakespeare Code was a crap episode, by the way. Louisa, what do you think? Are people overplaying membership numbers, as Gareth suggests?
You know, what's most frustrating about this to me is how much have we heard about reforms, polling in every single media, platform the last however many weeks. Yeah, and that is all about an indication of success. You know, there's actual real talk about reform becoming the next government. So again, shock, the media is saying, well, it's one rule for these, we are looking at a reform government. We're projecting that, but if it's 100,000 members on the Green Party, then that's irrelevant. They'll never make it. And the Spectator is owned by the same guy who owns GB News. He has 800 million. He's worth 800 million pounds. You can see why these are being published. And again, it comes down to this imagination. There's no alternative. We can't think of anything. And the thing is, what interests me as well is people want reform. Like, the Greens are actually offering reform. They actually are. Like, reform are offering more of the same, but doubling down on everything that's going to make it worse for you. So I think it's a load of rubbish, to be honest.
I mean, I want to get your response on his other points. First, he claims that the elites are those in academia. I mean, you're in academia. Are you the elite?
I wish.
So you're in the elite, apparently, and he calls reparations racist. So can you delve into what this elite... Because it follows the line of, Matt Goodwin. He thinks the new elite, there's this new elite. There isn't, right? It's the same people, right? So those comments, but also, calling reparations racist.
Yeah, with the academia being elitist, I mean, I'm sure that Asda bag is really giving elite, you know what I mean? It's just ridiculous. We know that maybe there was a time where academia was this sort of, it's becoming more of an ivory tower now because of the inaccessibility of higher education for a lot of people. But if academics could infiltrate government, then maybe government wouldn't be so, the Overton window might not have shifted so far to the right. Gary Stevenson talks about this all the time. Academics need to be in that space, and we're not invited, and we know that the government that we have now, the elites, they are asset owners. They own everything. They are looking after their interests, their assets, and I think that's the problem there. And to be honest, with the reparations that are racist, I don't even understand what that is about. I don't. Yeah.
I mean, I think maybe his reputation of a Doctor Who writer makes him sound better, but I'm sorry. There's people in chat saying the Shakespeare Code was good. I thought it was a terrible episode. I think it's a lot of nonsense in there.
Yeah.
Also, more members, more money, and more media coverage. And they're close behind the Tories. I think the Tories on 123,000. But yeah, I mean, the reason why I'm calling it bias is because you don't see these articles about any other political party. It's only the left. So that's why I think it's biased. But yeah, let's move on. But before we move on, I just want to remind our viewers that we are 5 volunteers keeping this ship going. We do this around our paid jobs. Our goal is to become full-time, meaning we can increase our content, be far more ambitious, and build a sustainable left-wing alternative. Now, your help has made so much of a difference already, from equipment to covering rallies and interviews. Your support means everything. Now, we rely on donations, so if you want to be part of a media organisation that seeks to destroy the oligarchs, then please head over to turnleftmedia.co.uk/supports. There you can support us monthly on Patreon, or there is another link for a one-time contribution. You can also become a YouTube member for just 99p. Thank you. Now, before we go on to our final story, I just wanted to show you this trailer to an upcoming film.
هنا صوت القدس.
This is Jerusalem calling.
شو في بالقدس بتضلك رايح جاي؟
بدي شغل يا زلمه.
كل يوم قاعدين نخسر في أرض، في فلاحين طروهم من أراضيهم.
وليش اجوا يعيشوا هون؟
بلادهم ما بدهاش اياهم.
Thomas Hopkins, Private Secretary to the High Commissioner.
يوسف بيساوي.
Is it the right of the English to distribute the land as they like?
Land registration will protect you.
بيجهزوا الأرض لقبانية جديدة جنب الأراضي بالضبط.
We are asking for your help in protecting our villages.
I ask you all to have faith. We can create a united and peaceful Holy Land.
يا اخوان البلاد عمالها بتضيع من بين ايدينا، ما هو يا بنوقف وقفة رجال يا بنوقف نتفرج.
يا خبيز يا رصاص.
عاشت الثورة!
We are looking for armed bandits who've been disturbing the settlers.
This is my little brother. He hasn't done anything.
I advise that the best solution to terrorism is to build a wall.
I cannot, in good conscience, sit here and become complicit in this.
What about your so-called freedom of expression?
That is nothing compared to what's coming.
You're at the crossroads of a major moment in time. Perhaps you should consider which side of history you want to be on.
أول مرة بحياتي خايفة أموت.
عاشت الثورة!
Palestine 36 is directed by Anne-Marie Jacquard, a Palestinian filmmaker, and is set to be released in cinemas on the 31st of this month. I think, is it Liam... Oh, what's the guy who plays Davos in Game of Thrones? Liam Cunningham, that's it. I think he's in it as well. Fantastic actor. Let's go on to our final story. To the surprise of no one, Israel has already broken the ceasefire deal.
Breaking news to bring you now. It's coming from the Israel Defense Forces, the IDF, and relates to Gaza. And they've put out a statement saying that earlier today, several suspects were identified crossing the yellow line. That's the line which the IDF has withdrawn to as part of the first phase of the ceasefire agreement in Gaza. So they said suspects crossed the yellow line, approached IDF troops in northern Gaza, which they say constitutes a violation of the ceasefire agreement. They say attempts were made to distance the suspects. They did not comply, continued approaching the troops, who opened fire to remove the threat. They say the reports regarding terrorists' infiltration to an IDF position are incorrect. And they finish off by saying the IDF calls on Gaza residents to follow its instructions and not to approach the troops deployed in the area. Nevertheless, that sounds very much like the continuation of at least some violence in the Gaza Strip, but the IDF saying that the line which they are holding to at the moment as part of that first phase of the ceasefire was crossed by suspects who didn't heed warnings, and the IDF say they opened fire to remove the threat. We'll have more on that as we get it from the region.
Israeli forces killed at least 5 Palestinians in Shujaiya, Gaza City, when drones fired on people inspecting their homes, despite the ceasefire supposedly being in effect. The Israeli military claims the victims crossed a boundary set in the truce and ignored warnings, so troops opened fire. Israel notified the UN that it was going to have a number of aid trucks entering Gaza and bar fuel or gas, citing Hamas delayed in returning remains of deceased hostages. This limited aid and supplies into Gaza. But the Rafah border crossing with Egypt has now been reopened after deceased hostages were released by Hamas. Unexploded bombs have also been found. Gaza civil defense spokesperson Mahmoud Bassal said many Palestinians returning to Gaza are encountering unexploded bombs and shells in the rubble of their homes. In comments made to the Canary, Bassal said, Palestinians are not returning to their homes, but to ruins, to enormous rubble, and to areas unfit for habitation or life. Now, there's been a lot of misinformation being spread around online, obviously, claiming that Hamas have killed all the women hostages because none were shown when hostages were exchanged. Podcaster, Katie Miller, asks, why are there no living female hostages? Then we've got right-wing grifter Sharon Davis. She said, hostages didn't die, they were murdered. Big difference. I can't think of a word horrific enough to explain how no female hostages made it out. None. I mean, she's supposed to say none, but she forgot the E on the end of that. GB News pundit Adam Brooks. No women hostages survived the Hamas monsters. How telling. Only for Julia Hartley-Brewer to correct him. Dumb post. The women were prioritised for release in earlier hostage deals. I mean, you know things are bad when you're forced to delete your tweet after Julia Hartley-Brewer corrected you. I mean, if she did that to me, I'd delete my account. But you just know, I'm sorry, you just know for a fact that had it not been a fellow right-winger correcting him, he would have doubled down, right? He would have deleted it. But the misinformation doesn't end there. People are now claiming that Hamas are randomly killing their own people. Hamas is out publicly executing people immediately after there is a tiny power vacuum due to Israel pulling back. These are the type of people they are. You cannot want peace in that area and want Hamas to stay in power or have any governing power. They don't want peace. They want the destruction of their neighbour. If you truly want peace, you should be calling for Hamas to disarm and disband, or you should be supporting them being removed. Hamas and peace do not go together. Now, Jeffrey Mead is one of the chief propagandists for Israel, by the way, it's worth noting. But we have another one. Breaking update. Hamas is armed and killing innocent Palestinians all over Gaza. Democrats just love murderers. I mean, what is this obsession with Democrats like siding with Palestinians? They've been on the same side as Republicans when it comes to Israel-Palestine. In fact, right, I know Trump's been terrible on this. Trump's done more. I know his ceasefire deal clearly hasn't held up. It's more than Joe Biden. Martin Medeus says, Hamas killing 33 Palestinians today, and he's got an image there of Hamas with, they're pointing their guns at some people we don't know. But it turns out that's not true. Hamas weren't killing innocent Palestinians. Rather, they were militias funded by Israel. Israel admits to paying, arming, and sheltering ISIS-linked mercenaries, warlords, drug dealers, murderers, sex offenders, collaborators, and fugitive criminals, and using them inside Gaza for dirty operations, i.e. kidnapping, assassinations, intel gathering, and looting aid. This is the Abu Shabab gang we've been warning about for 16 months. It's the gang responsible for looting the overwhelming majority of aid on Israel's command under IDF protection. Louisa, I'm sure you're not surprised the ceasefire was broken by Israel, but all the fanfare for Trump was clearly for nothing, wasn't it?
Yeah, obviously I think that Trump has no interest in the Palestinians, in Palestinian liberation. He's entirely interested in himself. I think he barely has an ideology. I doubt he is ideological. I think he is truly a career politician, but so much more than that. He cared about that Nobel Peace Prize, which I'm sure he'll be very upset to have not received. And yeah, I think whatever Trump did get for in terms of like fanfare for him was absolutely unwarranted. And if we didn't see that this was going to come, I don't know what people were seeing.
Yeah, and I think we frozen there. Yeah, we're back. Yeah, we're back. What was I saying? I think a lot of people were saying, why are people still protesting for Palestine? We got the ceasefire, as if one, Israel wasn't going to break it because they always do, and two, I mean, the Palestine protests weren't just for a ceasefire. It's end the occupation. It's free Palestine. People were right to continue to protest, weren't they?
Yeah, and they should. And also, all this talk about Hamas, and let's look at Hamas. It's not about Hamas. It's about Palestinian liberation. And they act like Hamas is the government. It's not. Palestine don't have a government. And that is the point. Like, they seem to be pitting. I mean, they have done they framed it as a war, that there's two equal sides here. There's absolutely not. My stepmother is Palestinian, and she knows, obviously too well what it's like. She's from the West Bank, and this is occupation. This is apartheid, and it's that we need to continue to protest about, because they might leave Gaza, but these people live under colonial rule, and that we need to fight that.
Yeah, I find it quite disgraceful when people call it a war. A war is when you have two equal sides, two sovereign states. I mean, Hamas was kind of a government when they were elected, but it's not a functioning government. No, I mean, the entire place is flattened. It's a fucking genocide. I do hate it when they're both sides of the issue. You're absolutely right. I think we're going to go to our comments. I'm sure there's been some fantastic comments throughout the show. Let's all say hello to Sarah. Sarah, how are you doing?
Hey, hello everyone. I don't know what's up with my laptop. It is just sounding like it's about to take off.
Yeah, I can do hear it a little bit.
Yeah, it's so loud. I don't know what's wrong with it. And my laptop's laggy. But yeah, it's been a really great show, honestly. Really great analysis. Louisa, incredible. And yeah, Curtis, it's great to have you too. I'm joking.
Thank you for that. That sounded so backhanded.
I'm actually joking. Okay, so just quickly, my pal Foot said 29% loves Thatcher, 71% literally hates her. He donated £2, so thank you, my pal. But it is true. I do feel like the overwhelming majority do dislike Thatcher. I think anyone who doesn't dislike Thatcher needs to get their head checked, because we know the impact that she's had on this country. And I think Thatcherism sort of forms the fabrics of Britain today. And that's a really scary reality, to think that Thatcherism till this day is impacting us in ways that are unfathomable, particularly for the working classes. So I don't know if anyone wanted to talk on that at all.
Well, I mean, one of my favourite comments actually was from, I think it's a former Labour councillor, right? He's left the party, obviously. And he says he wakes up an hour early in the day so he can hate Thatcher for longer. And I fucking love that. That lives with me forever. You don't hate her enough, right? You don't hate her enough. And obviously, Louisa, you've understood the ideology that drives her. But that visceral hatred the working class have for her, it's obviously so warranted, isn't it? I'm sure 71% do hate her. I'm part of the 71%.
Yeah, for sure. 100%. And then just on memberships, Full Music gifted 5 turn-up memberships, so thank you so much. So let's get into the comments really quickly. And whilst we're on Thatcher, Michael said, and as you guys mentioned this, let's not forget Section 28, and it's so true. I think that's something that forms a massive part of her Conservative government when it came into force. As part of like the Local Government Act, and barring it's so weird, like barring local authorities and schools from quote unquote promoting homosexuality or teaching its acceptability as a and like they use this language, this verbiage, as a pretended family relationship. So they really backed that, and I think that's something that literally only got repealed in our lifetimes, which is scary to think that it happened so recently. Really frightening. And I want to get your thoughts on this actually about Churchill. That we were told the same about Churchill, but when you talk to the older folk, they hated him with a vengeance, and that's why he lost the election. They're doing the same to Thatcher. Fact is, we don't. And I don't know if that's true. I mean, what do you guys think? Do you think the older generation hated Churchill?
I mean, he's kind of like mythologized now, isn't he? As like a hero. But again, I don't know. I think it matters if you lived through that time. Like people like Churchill the same reason they like Thatcher, because capitalism was in crisis. Obviously, there was a war going on. Strong person came in and took control of that crisis, and I think that's sort of, we're in constant crisis. Neoliberalism is a constant crisis. Like, it's a climate crisis, it's the cost of living crisis, it's, you know, everything's in crisis. So like the need for like a strong leader, what we see this like love of, you know, saying that Thatcher is like a favourite now or whatever. And maybe the same with Churchill. But if you did live through that time, then you would know that obviously following the war and prior to the war, Churchill was kind of not that great of a guy. And Thatcher wasn't either, other than for what she did at that time. You know, people said like a lot of people said like love her or hate her, she changed Britain, and you know, what else, we don't know what else. If we'd voted for a different government, would the country look, obviously it would look different today, but it needed change at that point. Obviously it was the wrong change in my opinion, but you know, and I think it's that really, it's the fact that maybe in their moment of crisis, then you can emerge as a hero, but out of that isolation, no.
I can see, Odin. I can see maybe you probably have a point there. I mean, I can't remember who said it to me, but it's sort of a famous verbiage, which is that as soon as the war was over, they kicked out Churchill and Clement Attlee swooped in. Right? They needed Churchill for the war, strong man for the war. But they knew that domestically he probably wasn't going to be any good. He also, I mean, you're absolutely right, the fanfare around Churchill and that he's been made into this sort of, you know, hero, which, I mean, you can say he was a hero for the war, right? But he also wasn't a great guy when it comes to India, the Irish, you know, supporting famines. He was a massive racist, right? And I know when you call people racist these days, they get more offended by, you know, being called a racist than actually being a racist, right? But it is true. I think that the people kicked him out because they knew once the war was over, they wanted a domestic-focused policy, which is obviously the Labour government of 1945 under Clement Attlee. So I tend to think maybe that is true. It would be very interesting to hear that. In terms of Thatcher, to be honest, as with most prime ministers, regardless of how they were viewed at the height of their popularity, there's not a single prime minister that leaves popular. They'll always end up being kicked out anyway, right? I mean, Tony Blair didn't fight the third general election. Margaret Thatcher was pushed out. That tends to happen with all prime ministers. Think of Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak, Theresa May. A lot of these don't go out on their own legacy. So I think part of it is when people leave, and when you say Thatcher, when she went, everyone danced. I think people just get sick of prime ministers anyway. What's interesting, though, is that 45 years later, despite the fact that all roads lead to Thatcher when it comes to the problems in this country, she is still seen, all right, no one's particularly popular, 29% isn't popular, but the least hated, crazy. I mean, for me, it's Thatcher, then David Cameron, easily.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Tony Blair, prick.
And Blair, yeah. Oh, actually, Blair and Cameron, it's hard to, like, Cameron with the 330,000 people dying for austerity, but you've got Blair with the Iraq War. So.
Exactly, like they are toe to toe with that one, so they can compete for second place if they want.
But compete for their place in hell.
Yeah, literally, or just sit next to each other. Yeah, and I like this comment by Tic Tac that she severely limited the political imagination of this country, and it's so true. Like her saying there's no such thing as society, like that is warfare. When you're undermining unions and local authorities and community organisation, you're trying to wage a war on collective identity and replace them with this culture of self-reliance and consumerism. And I think people were told to solve structural problems with personal effort, like buy your own council house and manage your own education and invest your savings. Like the collective was literally replaced by the individual, and I think that left Britain in some sort of like ideological chokehold that still exists today. Like when you present free markets and privatization and individualism as natural and inevitable, then you make ideas like socialism or collective ownership and strong welfare structures seem very outdated or even like absurd to talk about. Like you just end up being called like some loony lefty when you actually talk about how these things would really benefit working class communities. So yeah, I don't know if you guys wanted to comment on that.
I wanted what you just said there about individualizing problems. I think that this is the mental health crisis. There's a reason that you can't separate the fact that like male suicides are increasing year on year on year and just say that the population are getting sicker. Like this mental health is situational a lot of the time too. Like, and I think there's a website called like James's List or something like that, and it was started because it was about after the welfare state was destroyed, the numbers of suicides increased. So they listed these names so that they could obviously make this point that you cannot depoliticize mental health. It's not an individual problem. It's a societal issue, and it should be dealt like that. It should be dealt politically as well. Obviously go to therapy. We all need to do it. But we also need to tackle the systemic issues that are affecting people's lives.
Completely agree with you. We can't undermine the structural problems. And I think when we undermine them, we end up completely dismissing that sort of stuff.
It's interesting what Gareth said in his article. He said, if I have to hear the word systemic, then we need to weed you out because saying the word systemic is as bad as saying the P-O-N word, right? That's what he said in his article. And that's exactly the problem, though, because you're absolutely right. We've individualized the problems and we've individualized the solutions, because we've been told this idea there's no such thing as society. And look, the Mark Fisher book, Capitalist Realism, right, where he says, you can never sort of you imagine. Sorry, I'm fucking this up now. You can imagine the end of the world before you imagine the end of capitalism. There we go. Right. That was sort of the original idea of that, which is that there is no alternative. Right. You can imagine shit being on fire. You can imagine really serious political crises happening, but you cannot imagine an alternative, not just to capitalism, but this unique individualist neoliberal capitalism where the market is the answer to literally everything. And we've seen the answer to that, mass privatization, which isn't working whatsoever. So I do find that very funny, connecting it with what Gareth Roberts was saying in his article. Don't say the word systemic. The problem is it's largely systemic. A lot of social problems, cultural problems, right, in which the right wing want the individual solution, does come down to systemic and class.
Exactly. This is it. It's true. You're so right. And could you mentioned Zach and how he's being criticised in that article? I think this is a good comment. Sounds like Zach is pissing off the right people, Spec says, and it's fucking true, isn't it? Like they are really grappling at straws when it comes to trying to criticise Zach's leadership, the Green Party, and the strides that they're taking, and the people who are actually listening to Zach. So yeah, I think we've mentioned that quite a few times in the show, haven't we?
I did see a Twitter comment actually, which was quite good. Someone said, "Look, I'm a reform voter, but I actually quite like this guy." And I think it's interesting. It doesn't mean I swung the vote, but I think when you have an eco-populist sort of agenda, it's far superior than technocratic, boring briefcase politics. As we've discussed so many times on this show, people are probably bored of us saying it.
No, exactly. And then Michael kind of just says what we're all thinking: rotten piece of journalism, as we'd expect from that rag. And this, so final few comments. Edwin said, why do people think school teachers are the establishment? Yeah, why? It's so weird. Like, and this kind of ties in quite nicely to this comment. I love how they always make up new elites instead of actually hating on existing ones. And it's true, like, hello, it's not the teachers that are taking from you, lest we forget. It's actually the mega rich who want to make your life super hard because they're not contributing the ways that they should. So yeah.
I mean, like, there's this push to this cultural elitism thing, right? Which I'm sure, Louisa, you going through academia, you might have heard these arguments before. But I think there's this push from the right wing to say, all right, you might be leaving university with debts, so you can't really own things, so you can't really be economic elite, but you're part of the cultural elite. Have you come across that argument before?
Not really, but it's interesting that you say that. Like, if there is culture doesn't belong to the elite. Culture is all about like the population. Like that's the point. You know, the best culture comes from struggle. So why would it come from like the privileged? You know.
I mean, methinks is basically that just because not everyone is a reactionary or conservative, they don't like that and they can't accept that some people are socially progressive. Therefore, there must be a sort of drive behind the scenes, a dark force behind it, rather than the fact that not everyone is a reactionary twat. That's my view, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think second to last comment, Autumn says, when you get corrected by Julia Fashley Brewer, yeah, it's embarrassing.
Julia Hartley Sewer.
Yeah. That's so jokes. And last comment for the donations, Curtis needs a new winter blazer collection.
You criticising my jumper, Specs?
Yeah,
I actually put this on special. I was like, we've got a new guest on tonight. It's a good show. It's getting into the, similar. Yeah, actually, Specs, you criticise me, you criticise Louisa.
Yeah, that's not I love the knitwear tonight, guys. I really do.
I'm well upset. Like, I put this on specially thinking this is going to be a special show. And you want me to wear a blazer every single day. You want me to wear a blazer when it's fucking boiling hot, don't you? Right? What about my health? I did say it looked comfy. Yeah, it's actually a bit itchy, so I've got a vest underneath.
Yeah, so jokes. Cardi King Curtis Hart, literally. So jokes. But no, that's literally it for the comments. So thank you so much,
amazing.
guys.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Of course, that is all we have time for. Thank you to all our viewers who tuned in. And of course, thank you to Louisa for your amazing insights. Really appreciate you joining me. I really hope we make this a habit and you come on a lot more.
Yeah, I'd love to. It's been great. I've loved it. Thank you.
Now, remember to like this stream. And if you're not a subscriber, then hit that button. If you want us to grow, then you can head over to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. There is a link to our Patreon where you can support us monthly or follow the other link to give us a one-time contribution. Alternatively, you could become a YouTube member for just 99p. Thank you so much, everyone, and I'll see you on Friday.